Hey everyone, my name is Jesse Newland, and I do ops at GitHub, the sticker and t-shirt company that also happens to have a little bit of Git hosting on the side. I'm J Newland on most of the internets. And today I'm going to be talking about ChatOps at GitHub. So what is ChatOps? ChatOps is what we've been calling the pattern of automating common operational tasks with Hubot. Hubot is our Campfire, IRC, Jabber, several different transports, but it's essentially a chatbot. It's like EggDrop way back in the day. It's a very simple pattern for interacting with a robot in your chat room. So Hubot began as a very, very simple Campfire bot. You can do things like math and return funny images. But it doesn't do just that anymore. It's evolved into something completely different. Hubot has evolved into essentially the primary control surface for our entire infrastructure. So explaining how that works and why that's important is kind of hard just from the outside in. So I'll start with an example. So let's say that Vicent on our systems team has made some awesome patches to Git, and he wants to roll those out to our infrastructure and in a controlled fashion. He thinks it's ready to go, but he wants to do it in a slow, controlled fashion and make sure he doesn't break everything. So we use Puppet for configuration management, but use Hubot to interact with it and to deploy it. So here's how we'd manage this kind of change with the ChatOps style. So the boring stuff first, right? You check out a branch, maybe you'd bump the Git version number, you commit it, you push it to a branch, and you create a pull request. You do this every day. Once you're done writing up the pull request, you head back into Campfire and find that Hubot has nicely notified you that your changes have passed CI. We have Hubot interaction with Janky, our build server. So that's nice. So once you notice that it's past CI, it's a non-default branch, so that doesn't get auto-deployed, right? So we deploy Puppet to production to push that code out. Hubot returns the deploy output for this, lets you know that all worked fine. So Puppet has a no-op mode that we use to ensure that the changes we're preparing to roll out don't have any unintended side effects. It basically just simulates what would happen if you run Puppet on that branch. So we can run this no-op mode to simulate these changes against one file server, say file server 1. So you run that. Hubot tells you what happened. It tells you that the package Git version would have changed from our internal GitHub 12 to GitHub 13, right? So that looks good. Everything looked normal. It just would have touched the Git package. There's no unintended side effects. So maybe we'll roll this change out to just one file server briefly to control control the impact of any possible regressions that we introduce. So once that runs, Hubot returns the output. Everything looks fine. We can confirm the Git version has been upgraded. So maybe we want to just make sure that that file server is OK and make sure that the changes that we've rolled out haven't had any unexpected impact. We have support in Hubot for showing us graphs from collectD and Graphite. We say graph me the past hour, the collectD load on file server 1. And our file servers are actually a pair, so you can see both of the pairs running there, and you can see the load has gone up a little bit, but it's nothing that's outside of the normal bounds. So we do some more testing, and maybe we're confident to roll this version out. We think there's no major regressions. So we want to merge the pull request and ship this to production everywhere. So we merge the pull request. Hubot lets us know that's happened, of course. CI fires again to make sure master is green. Hubot tells you about that too. Once CI passes, the code is auto-deployed to production, and Hubot lets you know that it's starting and that your push triggered it. And then when that's done, of course, you see that the change has been, that the deploy is finished. And now that the new version of Git is on master, it's been shipped everywhere, right? And we can actually force a production Puppet run, and our Puppet configuration management runs on an interval. But if we want to push it out right now, we can do that as well. Once that's done, Hubot lets you know that everything happened and everything went as intended. The output's right there in Campfire. And we want to check the load on all the file servers, right? So we ask for a graph of everything. Here's all the file servers. There's no major spikes in the load, so that looks good. And maybe we take a quick peek at the logs from Papertrail to make sure we didn't break anything, right? So we ask Hubot for the logs, Hubot log me, and it returns a quick search and a quick excerpt of the logs that match that search. Everything looks fine. So we're done. Git's upgraded everywhere. What's really kind of cool about that, that's ChatOps, right? What's kind of neat about that is no one ever touched a terminal. And no one ever had to do something and then tell someone they did something there. Everything that happened in that past, in the past 20 slides or so, right? That all happened in the scope of one simple Campfire room, and there was no communication required between other people to coordinate it, right? You could see the flow of the tasks happening throughout the operation. So, simply put, Hubot is really the star of our ops team. I don't really do much. I just have Hubot do everything for me. So Hubot, we use it day in, day out to interact with all sorts of other simple tools that we've written that have little tiny JSON APIs. Heaven is the project internally that we use. It's essentially a JSON API wrapper around Capistrano. We use that to manage our deployments. Janky is similarly a JSON API that wraps Jenkins. GraphMe is our Hubot interaction and Hubot API client for Graphite. And shell is this collection of simple shell scripts that we have that perform all sorts of operations on the GitHub infrastructure that we interact with via Hubot. Write a bash script and suddenly it's available via Hubot. And Hubot interacts really nicely with all sorts of external APIs too. If you have a JSON API, making your service work with Hubot is pretty simple. We use all sorts of external APIs internally with Hubot. PagerDuty is one big one that we've been working on a bunch recently. So why is this stupid bot so important to ops? Why is this thing that just mostly returns or has a reputation of returning funny pictures? Why is that so interesting? There's a lot of upsides to this approach and a lot of benefits that we've seen as we move more and more of our operations into Campfire. So like I was saying earlier, this entire flow, everything I just described about rolling out a new version of Git to production, everyone sees all of that happen right there, right in Campfire. Everyone sees that from people in the operations team to people that maybe are on the systems team, to maybe even people that are on the support team that are interacting with users that have had a bug that this version of Git is supposed to fix. So if they're in the room with us while we're doing these things, we don't have to say, yes, I've rolled out those new changes. They can see it happen. They see it happen, and there's a lot of communication that isn't necessary because of this. And what's really even more valuable is the training aspects that come along with this. Everyone sees all of that happen on their first day. The first day that you join GitHub, you get in Campfire, and you're immediately overwhelmed with the amount of operations that are actually happening in the chat room, the things that people are doing that you're seeing, even though you're in your home office in Cape Town, right? So you don't just see how to roll out puppet changes or roll out a new version of Git. You see all sorts of things. Like you see how to check the CI status of a random branch that you might be working on. You see how to roll that out to one file server, or one front end, sorry. You see how to get graphs of the app's recent performance. That's like a New Relic-ish graph that we use internally a lot to see how things are going. You see how to check the status of all unicorns that are running across all of the front ends. You see how to check the status of the rescue critical queue. You can check out the load on all the front-end servers. You can check current connections to a front end that you just rolled out possibly some bad code to and see how it looks. You can check out the logs on that front end and realize that you did break shit. And then you might want to remove it from the load balancer, update the status site, and apologize to everyone, determine who's on call so you can buy them whiskey later, check pingdom to make sure you haven't broken everything. Then you might need to chill yourself out really quickly. The funny pictures are an important part of Hubot. Then you might revert back to master on the busted front end. Verify things that have returned to normal. Congratulate yourself. Then you could bring the fixed front end back into the rotation. Clear the alerts on the status page. And maybe while you were looking at the logs, you noticed a weird IP that was doing something odd. You might want to take a look at that. And when you realize it's a spammer, you could hit meme generator to make a joke about it. And then someone might cue up the song that popped in their head when they thought about drums and gorillas at the same time. I think that the jovial nature of a lot of the stuff that happens in Campfire is really quite important to the tactical operations that need to happen in ops sometimes. You know? I was actually on a game drive in Savi-San just like a week ago, right? And was listening to the guy that's driving our Jeep, talking to the 8 or so other people that are driving around in the area, talking about where the leopards were and everything. And it was quite amazing thinking about CB radio as something that's really similar to how we operate in Campfire. These guys have a system for ping and ACK, and they're talking shit to each other, but they're also passively aware of where the leopards are without going and finding them themselves. It's really similar to how we work. We queue up Phil Collins played by a gorilla, but then we're also aware of everything that's going on at the same time. So also, it's really good for just, I guess, the ops spirit, right? And just the building some camaraderie with your team, even though you've never possibly laid eyes on these people. So at its core, ChatOps means building tools that make it easier to operate your infrastructure via Hubot than via terminal or Chrome or whatever. And the reason you do that is because by placing tools directly in the middle of the conversation, everyone is pairing all of the time. And that's really the core concept, and I'm going to say that again, just so if you take anything away from this talk, this is what you should take away from it. By placing tools directly in the middle of the conversation, in Campfire, IRC, whatever, everyone is pairing all of the time. Teaching by doing is awesome, and that's a great side effect that we've seen from putting everything we possibly can into Hubot. Ryan Tomeko, who wrote the original Hubot, says that this is always my main motivation with Hubot, teaching by doing, by making things visible. And it's an extremely powerful teaching technique. When Ryan originally wrote Hubot, it was just a simple wrapper around a repository of shell scripts, and it's turned into so much more. But the teaching by doing thing it's really powerful. And this is how I respond to a lot of how do I do this questions in Campfire now. Someone asks how to do it, and you just do it and show them. If there's not Hubot functionality to do a thing that someone asks me to do, if it's possible, we write it. And by placing these tools in the middle of the conversation, it means you get the communication of your work for free. It's something that, in a distributed environment, it's super, super important. You have, as a remote employee, you have to make your work known. And if by doing the thing that you're supposed to do, you also communicate it, it makes it more effortless. So because we have this natural flow of work that happens in Campfire along with our normal discussion, there's lots of things that I haven't had to ask anyone recently. How's that deploy going, right? Are you deploying that, or should I? Is anyone responding to that Nagios alert? Is that branch green? How does load look? Did anyone update the status page? Did that deploy finish? And with 83 out of 148 employees not in the San Francisco Bay Area at any given moment, that's just what it was yesterday. Free communication is essential. Otherwise, these 86 people that aren't that weren't in San Francisco yesterday would have to do a lot more work to communicate what they were doing. Our ops team, specifically, is entirely remote. So Campfire is our main form of communication, right? And that's extremely important during outages or other situations that require tactical response. When you're in, there's a syndrome, and I've noticed a lot with some sysadmins and some people that work in ops. When they're responding to an incident, they work. They don't tell anyone what they're doing. And the way to figure out what they're doing sometimes is to look at their bash history, which is terrifying. But you don't have to say that you're spraying water on the fire if you're doing that with Hubot. People see you doing it. Another benefit of the ChatOps approach is that you can hide ugly interfaces and design exactly the interaction that you want with simple porcelain commands. My favorite example of this is the ugliest of the ugly projects that I use on a day-to-day basis, Nagios. Eye bleeds. So Hubot, if any Nagios alert fires, Hubot politely delivers this alert straight into chat. And from there, we can act the alert, fix stuff, check the alert, get an output of the status of the alert. If our problem, whatever we were doing didn't fix it, we can schedule some downtime so it doesn't bug us for a few minutes while we fix it, or we can mute the alert and then unmute it later. So we can interact with Nagios without any unnecessary eye bleeding, right? And making this easy means developers and other ops engineers, and especially developers, schedule downtime and mute the alerts when they're testing things. It would be insane for me to ask a developer to use this thing to schedule downtime when they're testing something on one server. I wouldn't want any of you to ever have to touch this ever. But if they can just do that here, it's something they'll actually do. One of my favorite services that I love to hate is PagerDuty. And for those of you that are unaware, it's a paging and incident management tool for operations team. It allows us to build an on-call schedule, and when we get an incident, it will be assigned to one person, and they're notified via phone or all sorts of other methods, and they can act and respond to it. It basically lets us manage an on-call rotation. And it has a similarly difficult interface to operate. But we just finished up some nice PagerDuty integration for Hubot, and are planning to open source that soon. If nothing's wrong with the site, you just ask Pager what's up. It says chillin', everything's okay. What's nice about this too is one of the pieces we've added to the PagerDuty integration, specifically for the ops team, is that in an on-call rotation, especially in the world of ops, there are sometimes little chunks of time that you have to go on with normal life, and maybe you aren't in the best situation to tactically respond to an incident, like GitHub being down, for example. Like maybe someone shows up at your door, or you might want to take a shower, or go have dinner with your girlfriend or your partner. And if you're in a normal rotation in an on-call schedule, sometimes those things happen when you're on call. And for years, I've worked with ops teams and really have tried to encourage the thought of just taking little chunks of the pager from people. I'll take it for 15 minutes, right? That's something that you normally do if people are standing watch at a guard post. Someone needs to go use the restroom. Someone can just stand in real quick. But with this interface, it's been kind of hard to ask people to do that, and it's hard to enforce that culture. But one of the things we've added to this PagerDuty integration just recently is you can say, pager me 60 minutes, and you get the pager for that amount of time. And that's encouraged a really nice sharing culture for our ops team. And just by writing simple porcelain commands that make it easy and free, and provide free communication of a task that's hugely beneficial, but previously was kind of difficult. It's inspired this whole change in culture in how we do on call. And just simple porcelain wrappers like that around tasks that you want to encourage often make them really easy to do and actually make people do them. Yet another benefit of the ChatOps approach is that you get mobile support for free. Well, that is if you have a team of awesome iOS developers that have built an actually functioning Campfire client for the iPhone. It's kind of ugly in some ways, but it's pretty nice. It's getting there. This means that you can do anything Hubot can do from your phone, which means from your couch, or your bed, or a beach in Hawaii, or a Jeep on a game drive, which means you can fix a lot of things without pulling your laptop out of your bag. I could deploy a branch to GitHub right now from my phone. I can revert a deploy. I can put the site in maintenance mode. All of these things are sometimes extremely necessary to do very quickly. And sometimes, there's we talk about this in the world of ops when we're communicating incident response. What's your laptop ETA, right? If you're on call and maybe your laptop is downstairs, people will pull out their phone and instantly start communicating and say, my laptop ETA is 2 minutes, right? Well, now you can do those things while you're working towards getting to your laptop and working towards being available in a more tactical fashion, right? Which is pretty powerful. And that mobile support, deploying branches from your phone if necessary, and tactical response on the way to the car to pick up your laptop, that's ChatOps at its finest. So, in summary, who better to summarize this than Hubot himself? I asked Hubot what he thought about ChatOps, and here's what he said. ChatOps all the things. Listen to what Hubot says. You'll love it. Your ops team will love it, your developers will love it, and any remote workers that you have will love it. It helps encourage remote work, which, as we all know, especially in a beautiful place like South Africa, gosh, you can go sit on a balcony and watch whales, for God's sakes, and work if you have all this stuff in front of you. You'll help developers learn how to interact with ops tools without any additional work. You'll help teach designers how to deploy things to production without any additional work. And you'll help them feel confident in it because they've seen it successfully work before. That's pretty awesome. So there's an obligatory plug here. If you can't ChatOps all the things at your gig now, come work at GitHub and we can do that. That's all I have. Any questions? Anyone about just the general approach? I saw you first, Jonathan.
How do you implement it from kind of scratch? I imagine if you implement things, you just see stuff going up Campfire and we're like that 5 years.
Yes. So we have, at last count, around 150 Campfire Rooms. Kind of, yeah, mind-blowing. I think I'm in about 10 at any given moment, right? So there's different contexts for all sorts of different things. We have one room that's just called the notices room, and that kind of is intended to spew all of the verbose things, right? And I've actually been threatening to, and I haven't done it yet, but I've been threatening to set up rooms that are critical warning, info, notice, and debug. I think it would actually work really well. Not yet. But yeah, people naturally group around their team, and there's a bit of a culture of just respect around not doing something noisy in a room where people are actually having a discussion. We have several rooms that are intended specifically for experimentation. There's a Hubot lab room, for example. People just do whatever in there, and it's intended to just be a mess of noise. Jonathan? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. I think that, right, so what you're asking is that the people don't actually, what happens when people don't actually work on the infrastructure required to do the things that Hubot does for them? I think we've actually kind of found the opposite. People, one of the things people often do in their first week at GitHub is add something to Hubot because they find it so interesting. and they find it so powerful that Hubot is, I don't have stats on this, but I would venture to say that Hubot has more contributions from more employees at GitHub than any other project that we have, just because it's such a core part of our operations and a core part of our culture even. I think that it actually inspires people to figure out what powers the thing behind it. I think it's just because you can't avoid Hubot, and it's a source of interest, I guess, to a lot of people. So that gets rid of that problem. Oh yes. So we have Hubot itself has a. So the question was, if Campfire was down, how would we deploy? Hubot has a built-in kind of REPL, so you can load up Hubot and just have a prompt to Hubot. So in the event that Campfire is down, you can deploy easily just by loading up Hubot on the production box. And we have a kind of a cold, spare deployment of Hubot that's ready to fire up if possible, if necessary. I've also threatened to write a wall adapter for Hubot. Still hasn't happened. Other questions? Yes? Cool. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Sure. The question was, you've rolled out some deployment stuff and have trouble interacting with Bash via Hubot and asking about open sourcing Heaven, the API we use for deployment. I think that we've talked about open sourcing Heaven a lot, and Heaven has a lot of very specific hacks related to GitHub's infrastructure. And I think that what has essentially been decided is that, like what happened with Hubot, the open sourcing of Heaven would essentially involve a rewriting of it. So it's definitely down the road. It's something that we've talked about for sure, though. We do, however, have a shell bridge in Hubot that's completely separate from Heaven that actually just uses nodes like shell exec wrapper. And we have some safety, some stuff in there to do proper escaping. And I'm not sure if that's available in the Hubot scripts library, but if not, it seems like that one would be pretty straightforward to add. I'll take a look at that, and you can hit me up offline to help you out. Cheers. Any other questions?
Just as you talking about the mobile communication method, do you ever feel like overwhelmed or frustrated or carrying the work wherever you go?
Well, I've just spent 2 weeks driving around South Africa, mostly ignoring work. So I'm getting better at that. Ops is actually, the world of ops is actually kind of quite challenging for that. I feel, in a lot of ways, I feel, responsible to all of you if GitHub is slow or down, right? So it's not a sense of, to me, it's not even a sense of the fact that my work is available. It's more of an obligation that's the challenging part to overcome. I feel that we have a very strong culture of ignoring work when necessary and responding to it only when it's okay for you. The asynchronous nature of work is actually, that plays really nicely into Hubot, because you can always read the transcripts. Someone pings you and asks you for something and you're not available now, it's fine to do it later. And I think that having work always available to me allows me to choose when I work instead of driving somewhere and working then. And it's allowed me to do things like come here for 2 weeks and occasionally do a little bit of work in the evening so as not to completely ignore things, right? I think that the flexibility that it gives you requires, of course, some mindfulness and some real thought about how you approach it, but in the end, it's worked out well for me, I guess. The question was if you've ever heard of Hubot in a Skype chat room. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if there's an adapter for that. Nice. That sounds fun. Wow. I imagine that you could write one. I imagine it would probably involve lots of hacks, but, you know, good luck. In the back? Yes. We have, the question was about security. We have both kind of policies that we adhere to internally around lock codes on phones, and just we have a very strong culture around ensuring that the loss of a device does not allow access to anything on GitHub. But also inside Hubot itself, for example, if Campfire was compromised for some reason and someone was in the ops room, we have a role-based access system that's kind of built into Hubot that allows, one of the first things that happens to a person when they join is, say Jeff, right, pops into Campfire. I would say, Hubot, Jeff is trusted. And that would allow Jeff to run operations against Hubot. And otherwise, you would ask Hubot to do something, and you'd say, I don't know who you are, right? We have some simple stuff like that, and some very small additional roles that protect certain specific commands to only certain groups of people. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And all of them will run different commands to different things. How do you avoid, from an admin perspective, how do you avoid trouble one another? In a file system, obviously we'll spot a problem,
Mm-hmm.
but another two admins will spot the exact same problem, and all of you start responding at once.
Sure. The question was about kind of quick response and crowding, how we prevent that. So we have two kind of approaches to doing that. The first is that the pager rotation establishes whoever is on call has the primary responsibility to resolve any incident that happens. And we adhere to that pretty strictly. If an incident comes in, and for example, this happened the other night. If an incident comes in, and the person who's on call hasn't responded to it in an amount of time that we think that the other people in the room might think is acceptable, before doing anything, they take the pager from them and say, I have the magic baton, right? Or they'll acknowledge the incident and declare intent, essentially. And you do that with a simple command, so it's not very hard. Yeah, pager me 60 or whatever. Or you can just say pager ACK and then the incident number, and it will declare that you're resolving the incident. And another facility we have for that is there have been in the past incidents of clobbering amongst the many rooms that exist. Maybe someone is deploying here and they don't realize someone else is deploying over here. And we've recently enforced some specific operations must be done in a certain room to ensure that people are aware of what's happening at any given time. Sure. I would go to github.com/hubot/hubot, and it's a simple app that's written in CoffeeScript and Node, actually very little Ruby there. Get a Campfire account, set that up. Set up Campfire accounts for everyone in the company that might need it. And I've actually been, not at GitHub, but at the two previous jobs prior to this, I kind of pushed Campfire in the door. And it's definitely a challenging thing at first. People are used to the phone, right? And people that aren't used to chat have some difficulties with it. But if you start using it as your primary form of communication, other people may follow, and you have to, if you want to institute this, you have to be the driver, and you have to really encourage other people to do it and almost nag them, saying, put this here, right? At GitHub, that's not a problem because it's that way from day one. But yeah, I think just setting it up and setting up Campfire and Hubot, the combination of the two, it's pretty powerful, even in the just bare, even with the default scripts. There's lots you can do with it. Just show them funny cat pictures. How can they, how can they refuse that? Anything else? I have no idea. I'd love to. I think it'd be amazing. You should ask John Maddox. He's the one that's working on it. It's, gosh, the one that exists is frustrating, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry. I hope that we can, to be honest. But, all right. Well, thank you. Cheers.